Well, hello, friends, and welcome to today's Top Leaders. I'm so excited to be with you today because we're talking about kind of an interesting thing some of you may not even associate with leadership, and that we're going to be talking about career breaks and sabbaticals. And as you see here, I have my amazing guest with me, Katrina McGhee. Katrina, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Good. Yeah, we're glad to have you for sure. So I'm going to let everybody know about your background, and then we're going to delve into some good questions here. So here's the official bio on Katrina. Katrina McGhee is a career break and sabbatical expert and author of the upcoming Taking a Career Break for Dummies. As a certified master coach with an MBA, Katrina helps mid-career professionals create happier, more fulfilling lives. So good. Informed by her own successful break, Katrina's Break Blueprint guides her clients as they create life-improving break experiences. They return from their breaks recharged, inspired, happily employed, and forever changed. On their time off, her 60-plus clients have traveled the world, launched a business, changed careers, and more. Katrina is an enthusiastic world traveler and digital nomad. Her advice on career breaks and travel has been shared across various outlets, including Forbes, Smarter Travel, Thrive Global, and Yahoo. So again, Katrina, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So good. So, all right, rapid fire questions. First of all, salty or sweet?
Oh, I love salty and sweet together.
Like that Chicago mix?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. With the cheddar and the caramel corn. Yes.
So good. All righty. Okay. Today, what's your favorite book?
Ooh, today my favorite book is The Surrender Experiment.
So good. That's awesome. Can I try that experiment?
Yeah, it's apparently life-changing is what I've learned through that book. Yeah.
Nice. Oh my gosh, so good. Okay. And if you could travel to one place right now, where would you want to go?
Oh, okay. It's heading into June. I would love to go to Greece, back to Greece, and I would love to go visit the islands.
Okay. Awesome. And it's funny for me to ask that question from someone who's been to lots of places.
I know, that's what I'm just thinking about all the places I've been and where do I want to go back to?
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That sounds great. Speaking of Greece, kind of related, I just had dinner with some Turkish friends the other day, and she made Turkish food, and it was awesome. So
yeah,
I had no idea it was so similar to Greek food, but it was fabulous.
Yeah, Turkish food is good, and their yogurt and all. I was a fan of the Turkish food.
Yes, that's awesome. Sounds good. Okay. Favorite song?
This one's really tough. I love All I Do by Stevie Wonder, but I love all songs, but that's like a go-to for me.
Yeah, I love that. I'm like, I have to go play it again because I'm like, I can kind of remember it. Okay. And what is your, what's your biggest pet peeve?
I hate when people, I hate saying this because it sounds so, I just hate when people are pretend listening to you. I hate whenever they're doing the nodding and you know that they're not anywhere in the conversation. And then you have that awkward moment of do I even just finish the sentence or do I just stop talking?
That's awesome. It's great. By the way, I am listening to you while you're on the podcast.
I appreciate you for that.
Of course. Yes. I try to be present. That's awesome. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Or you ask a question and they realize that you didn't, they didn't hear it.
Yeah. They didn't hear it and they just stare awkwardly. I'm just going to pretend I'm processing what you said.
Yeah. Right. It's so good. All right. And then finally, what's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, this one's tough. It honestly probably changes day to day, but one of my favorites is The Notebook. I don't even know if I'm allowed to have that be my favorite my movie, but when it's on, I will always stop and watch it.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so that plus a yummy, salty sweet treat, and it's I'm good.
Exactly.
That's so great. Oh, I just want to go see that movie again. I haven't seen it in a minute. So I love that. So good. All right. So getting to the real business here. Let's talk about sabbaticals and career breaks. So if you would define what a sabbatical is and then separately what a career break, and then we can look at kind of how they differ, how they're similar.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with a sabbatical, technically sabbaticals are granted, by places of employment. So when you're taking a sabbatical, you're still technically employed by the place of business. Teachers take sabbaticals, professors, many different, that's sort of where it started, but all over, all companies, but you're working. And so you have this time off. Usually you're maintaining your benefits. Some people are, maintaining some level of salary or income while they're traveling. Some don't. But you're essentially taking this time off to do many things, recuperate, possibly go find some inspiration, upskill, just go find your joy, your passion, have some time off, spark some creativity. But you're doing it with the understanding that you're coming back to your former, to your employer, right? Because you never sort of break that bond. Whereas a career break is a very similar experience in that you have this extended period of time to explore, to recover, to, find your inspiration, to upskill. But you do that, and it all begins with leaving your job. So during a career break, you've sort of taken that grand leap where you don't know exactly where you're going to land once it's over. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh yeah, it's nail biter. And you just sort of leap into the unknown, right? But it's a similar, when we get to that period of time where you're trying to decide what to do and you're taking that extended break, it's similar, but the difference is like in your mind, instead of thinking about returning to your employer and kind of coming back to the same place that you left from, you're creating this possibility to really go anywhere or do anything.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense, because it's, what a different mental space to be in when you're on the actual break, be it sabbatical or career break.
Yes, it's so fascinating. And, I think they each come with their own level of stress, right? Because there's the uncertainty when you're on a sabbatical of, am I going to be different? And if I'm different, how do I go back to the same place as the new me? And how do I fit in? And am I going to be behind? So it's this idea of, revisiting a place where you were one version of yourself and now you have to bring this new self there and you don't want to feel like you've fallen behind. Whereas on a career break, the world is your oyster, but all of that uncertainty can sometimes feel a little terrifying because there are limitless possibilities. And so a lot of that sort of, stress or the thoughts that you're trying to solve for are things about what would I do? What will I do once this break is ending? What will come next for me? Yeah,
I can totally see that for sure. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so excited we're talking about this because it's really fascinating to host a lot of different guests here on today's Top Leaders, because there's so many different aspects about leadership that I don't think people even realize can be an aspect of leadership, right? And so this whole idea of taking a career break, I know that when I'm coaching people and we're talking about leadership, they're usually working at a company right now. Usually the situation, they're leveling up to a new job. Maybe it's like a first timer coming from being like a coworker to being a manager, or they're going from one leadership level to another, et cetera. And so it's bringing up, I always say, new levels, new devils, right? So it's like, oh boy, oh mama, it's like stretching and it's opening, but it's super in context of that job at the time, and so I'm just trying to think about, from your perspective as somebody who's coaching people through this, let's talk about your thoughts around your advice for these leaders if they themselves are considering taking a sabbatical or career break. And I don't know, maybe we need to kind of talk about each of those separately, but talking to the leaders, for themselves specifically, what are some advice points you have for them?
Yeah. Oh, I had this phenomenal experience with one of my clients who was an executive, senior executive at Microsoft. And he actually hired me to help him take a 3-month sabbatical from Microsoft, just to recharge, right? He'd been there for a very long time. He is hugely of service, and sort of seeing the level of, passion that he had to generate for caring for himself, because it was hard for him to step away from caring for others and from leading his team and feeling like, will everyone be okay if I take a step back? And then the most interesting thing happened, after we had started our initial discussions, he kind of went back to finish, get prepared for the break, and then wanted to work with me during the break. And then it turns out he accepted an offer to become a CEO of a completely different company. So we started, preparing for a sabbatical. And then in that space between talking about it and getting ready to actually start it, it completely changed. And now it was a career break. And I think what he showed me that was possible, because this break ended up only being 2 months long, is applicable to people, to leaders that are wanting to take a career break or wanting to take a sabbatical. And that is the power of pouring back into yourself. I think as leaders, you care a lot, right? About, if you're a good leader, you care a lot about your team. You care a lot about the business or the company that you're working for. And you sort of become, what feels like this irreplaceable part of the fabric, right? Of how things are going.
Yeah.
But I want leaders to consider, number one, right? You're role modeling for everyone that looks up to you and everyone that you lead, how to live your life. So if you don't take time to care for yourself, to really live your life and nurture the things that are important to you outside of your work, right? You're not modeling that or inspiring that in others. But the level of transformation and reinvigoration that I saw Hollis, my client, have through this experience was incredible. In just 8 weeks, he went from like feeling really tired, right? Like really needing this break and just time to pour into himself, to being super connected to his family, having immense quality time with his family, connecting with his friends, his community, having downtime for himself. I think at some point he went deep sea fishing, which is his like healing and restorative, experience. But he came back ready to tackle new frontiers, to have new challenges, to really rise to that new occasion as CEO of this new company. And, like we recorded an interview on YouTube, so I know I can share this, but he said in that interview, I could not have been the leader, the CEO that I needed to be without this break. And I didn't even know that at the time, but it allowed me the reset that I needed to come in and lead and be mentally tough and prepared for this challenge. And I just want to end this by saying, right, when you're running on the hamster wheel, it can feel like the only way to be successful is to run faster and harder and to keep going. But when you take a moment to step off and to like take a deep pause, to like heal your knee, if your little hamster knee is like feeling tweaked or you just need some like nourishment, right? But to take care of yourself, it's like when you go back to run some more, you are just feeling so much more inspired. You have better ideas and you have so much more energy, right? You can actually do the running. So, it's kind of like taking one step back to take 10 steps forward.
I love that. The little sprained hamster knee. Oh, little hamster. Oh my goodness. And that's what a great example of that break. And then what he was able to do probably in his role. Right. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Sliding Doors with Glenn.
Yeah, of course.
Oh my gosh. Right. And so it's like, the sliding door. So she doesn't get on the subway train. And so then that sets a whole bunch of different things that happen versus she got on the subway and got to her destination and then the other things happen. Right. So I just love the movie, how it tracks like side by side, like what would have happened if that sliding door did or did not close. Right. But it's like, thinking about this guy, like, how interesting it would be to have a side-by-side comparison of what he would have been like as a CEO had he not had that break.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell you, I think he's an amazing human and he's super talented, incredibly smart, incredibly caring. I'm sure he would have done his best and it would have been good, but I think he wouldn't have been able to sustain. Right. I think his ability to come in, he was traveling all the time, getting, the connections and meeting people and doing all that. And it required a lot. And I think his family felt poured into, he felt poured into. So everyone was ready for him to hit it at level 10 and to make it sustainable, to just like really like hit the ground running and keep going.
That's so awesome. I love that. So another thing that you mentioned was talking about his desire to, was it the deep sea fishing? Is that what you meant? Okay. All right. So over the years, when I've heard people talk about like sabbaticals or taking some kind of break, whatever, there's always like an associated like thing, there's this big event. I'm backpacking through Mexico for a month. It's, whatever, some like big, huge deal. And then everybody else is like, okay, that makes sense. Like you go and you do the big deal during the break. But then I've talked to other people who don't have a quote unquote big deal moment, right?
Yeah.
And they're just at home doing stuff, maybe weekend trips, or I don't even know, like whatever, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're still having career breaks. So I want to talk about a little bit because I have heard so many people over the years. It's like, in order for it to be like legitimized, they have to have like the big deal.
Yeah.
Anyhow, can we talk about this a little bit?
We can so talk about this. And I'm so glad that you're saying this. So this is what's really funny. Like, exactly to your point, right? There's so many ways to do a break. Your context of your circumstance will be different person to person. You might have family, you might have kids, you might have, like you might just be a person that really needs to rest. And your juiciest sort of dream break might be, being a tourist in the town that you live in that you've never really got to spend time in and reading a lot of books, right? I have
Right.
clients that have taken off a break just to write. And that's a very sort of isolating experience that doesn't involve travel. It involves like being still and doing a hard thing. But what was really interesting, one of the most interesting things about working, again, with my client Hollis, like he was fixated when we started on this idea of having an epic break, right? He's big, like big time guy, like he's doing big things, like, he takes big vacations, like, he experiences that. And so he was like, I need to make this worthwhile. So there has to be something epic. And he would say that, right? Like, I need something epic. Those were his words. And for him, deep sea fishing was actually not epic because it was something he does as a love, like a love and a passion of his. And he does it. I think he has family like near, somewhere near the coast. And so he goes to visit them and does this like thing. But for him, that wasn't really considered epic. And what we discerned through his 2 months, the act of taking a break in and of itself is epic. So whether you're doing some fancy, big Instagram worthy experience or not, being willing to explore a new way of being willing to remove your soul identity from being wrapped up in what you do, right? As all of who you are or most of who you are, that in and of itself, that work is epic. And so some of my clients don't have one grand sort of feature, but they have the most incredible experience, which is why when we're planning a break, we come up with a purpose statement and 4 themes. So their 4 themes are the pillars of the break, and that is what they get from it, regardless of whether there's sparkles involved or not. It is the purpose, the essence, and the sort of the reason, right, for this break. And for some of my clients, it is their chance to go big. It is their chance to travel because, that was my story, right? When I took my 20-month break, that was just something I could never do while working my corporate job. I could never take a year off to travel and be working. And so I think things like travel are harder to come by while you are working. And so if you have that desire, right, you want to do that while you're on a break, but that's not everyone's desire. And at the end of the day, all you need to have a successful, life-changing, and life-improving experience is to really be intentional about understanding what you need to get from this experience and then giving that to yourself.
Oh, I'm just thinking about all the souls on this planet who don't even know themselves enough to know what to even be asking about. I mean, Katrina, there's a lot of people that are pretty darn well broken and every day waking up, going to work, and they're sad and they're just like, meh, and they're just going through the motions. Oh, yeah. So when you're talking about that, like knowing yourself and knowing, I mean, that's a big deal. So are you helping people to come to that center?
Yeah, absolutely. I have like 5 questions I love to ask. And, they're simple questions. Like one of them is, what would make this a worthwhile experience? Like if you took this break, what would you need to get from it to feel like at the end of the day, you could say that was really worthwhile, right? But it's just taking a moment to ask simple but thoughtful questions about, what do I need? What does success look like to me? And defining it on your own terms.
I love that. So good. So good. Okay, everybody, I got to let the cat out of the bag. For full disclosure, I can't not do this anymore. Anyhow, Katrina actually coached my husband as he took really, initially I was thinking a sabbatical, but it was a career break that Chad went through. And so it was so good. And I talked a little bit about it in a previous episode of Today's Top Leaders, where I shared about Chad and his great example of how he shows up at work and whatnot. But one of the things that my husband's a nurse, so we'll tag it in the show notes here or something like that, so people can go, listen to that other one too. But one of the things is that he was a nurse and he was totally hitting the wall. I mean, as his wife watching him just like literally melting, I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. And thank my lucky stars above, Katrina and I had already been connected. And so when he was ready for a break, and I didn't want to coach him because it's really, really not a good idea to coach your loved one. I'm just telling anybody out there, don't do it.
True. It's true.
It's not a really bad idea. And so it's smart enough to know that, and just so grateful though, Katrina, that you were in my ecosystem. So I could be like, Chad, here's a person. I think she's very capable, but you decide. And then of course, you charmed him with all your amazingness. And he's like, I got to work with her. I'm like, great. I'm glad you want to work with her.
Yeah.
But where I'm going with it is that when he came out of his career break, he wasn't even sure if he wanted to stay a nurse getting into it in the first, like coming out of it. I mean, he was pretty disenchanted with the healthcare system. And I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole because we could just spend a whole time talking about how medical healthcare is just a hot mess. But anyhow, he's like, I'm probably not going to end up in that again. And I'm envisioning him like going from being a nurse to like running a roofing company or something.
Yeah.
Totally different. You know what I mean? And so not to say that he couldn't do it. I was just more like, well, this will be interesting to see what happens. In the end, he became a nurse again. Different. So he went from care management to instead being a bedside nurse. But he was different, just like your other CEO clients, right? When Chad rolled into that hospital within the first 2 weeks, and he was different. And the stories he would come home and tell about patient experiences and what he was doing from them. And I told him, I said, I wish I had to be in the hospital for you to be my nurse, because whoever gets you in the next like month or two, like they're going to be like, who is like, I'm like, you're going to set a whole new bar for like patient care from an RN perspective. So it was pretty cool to see that happen. And so I certainly have a very personal experience with that in my own household. You know what I mean? But you get to see this time and time again where people are coming back recharged.
Yeah, it's like a whole new version of yourself, and not to make it all about Chad, but I do have to give that guy credit. Chad did his work, right? Like he was willing to be in discomfort and then to like raise his hand and be like, I'm in discomfort and I'm going to tell you about it. Right. Yes. And then we could work on it. But that is the point of the break. The point of the break is to break whatever isn't working and then rebuild it into something that allows you to be more of your fulfilled, happier, more, purpose connected self. And I think he's a great example of how the most minor, seemingly minor shifts can be really deep and meaningful when you give it space to really go there, right? To really be like, I'm willing to rethink my relationship to productivity. I'm willing to consciously consider what I think lazy is and is not. I'm willing to reestablish a new relationship with rest, right? And he was willing to do all of those things. And so, what I see in my clients, especially the ones that create a completely different reality, even if their circumstances haven't changed that much once their break is over, is that they were willing to explore themselves and to challenge old ways of being and to really reestablish their connection to themselves and think about, what is my true identity separate of what I do and like how I move through the world.
Oh, I love it. It's so good. So good. We speak very favorably of Katrina in our household. So
I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You and our little daughter, she just thinks you're awesome. And
She's
so, I guess where my questions go then is, if we know this is something that is healthy and good for us to do, so why aren't we doing it?
Oh, yeah. That $1 million question. And here's what I'm going to offer. It's a mixture of several things coming together. And I'm going to tell you what I believe they are. Okay. Number one, we are a very productivity obsessed culture. And so because of that, right, our self-worth and our level of success is so intimately tied to how productive we are. And productivity is seen in a very narrow lens, defined very narrowly as to like, what do we produce? What externally can you see of me doing, right?
Yeah.
And so when you think about your self-worth being tied up in how much you do, it's like we feel like we can never stop doing. Number two, we're putting all these things off. So many of us fall into this fallacy of believing that we can get to it later. Life doesn't wait for us, right? It doesn't wait. If you want to be happier, you have to start working on that now. You have to find pockets of time to do the work now, because you're not magically going to be gifted this experience of being happy, you know, at some magical age. Like, it's something you have to co-create. You have to show up and do the work. And I think a lot of times we just think we have more time than we really have, which we don't. And I think one of the other reasons that it's so hard is it's unfamiliar. I mean, our human brains are wired for comfort, right?
Yes.
And in the past, that was what we did. We would work and work and work until retirement, and then we retire and everything was great. But those jobs didn't require as much of us, right? We weren't taking our work home with us. We weren't always connected. We weren't being pulled in a million directions. We weren't, you know, comparing ourselves to other people and feeling like we were always falling behind. It was a much simpler time as far as like our relationship to work went. And we just don't want to leave the comfort of like this bubble of knowing what to expect. And even though it doesn't work anymore, and even though we're really tired and work culture has changed over the years, this idea that you just stay until you're retired has not. And I think it's just hard to do an uncomfortable thing unless you either can make a case, like someone makes a case and you're like, yeah, I actually see the point in that. Or you just become you hit a pain point, right? You hit a pain point where you're like, I can't continue on this path. I have to do something differently.
Oh my goodness. And the whole, like the ecosystems in our workplaces, right, that don't champion this, because like, you know, I mean, it makes sense. Business as a corporation, they have goals, right? And if it's a publicly traded company, they've got like a whole nother group of people holding you accountable, you know, by way of stockholders and shareholders, right? And so it's like this whole thing is built to not make it okay to take a break, to slow down and, you know, whatnot. I mean, there are some companies will do things like no meeting Fridays, right? So it's like, okay, employees, nobody's allowed to have a meeting, use that day to learn about something or to get your other work stuff done, you know? So, but to me, like, but that's not a career break. That's just not having meetings on Friday, you know? It's probably in an effort to stem the tide towards mutiny on the Bounty. People are like, I'm out of here. You know, there's too much going on. And so, but how can like the leaders deal with this? What can they do to really embrace that? Hey, maybe their people need a sabbatical or a career break. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some people who are like, actually, that person just needs to flat out quit and go figure it out. And then, you know, come back to work in another way. Cause like you said, it's very different, right? The sabbatical compared to a career break.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's understanding what that benefit could be, right? So there's this idea of a refresh. One of my clients right now that I'm working with, you know, he is a leader and he is really awesome at his job. He works in a tech company. Many layoffs have been had, but you know, he's still there. He's still working. He's at an inflection point where he's looking for a refresh. He really loved everything he's done in the past, but he's changed. His life has changed, right? The world has changed. And he's looking for, how do I reconnect to a sense of purpose in the work that I do? And I think as a leader, right, when you offer someone time to disconnect, you're saying, like, go value the parts of yourself and nurture the parts of yourself that make you a whole person, because work does not make you a whole person. It's part of who you are, but it does not make you a whole person. So that you can bring that whole person back to this office and contribute. And I think it also provides a window that these people can go through. They can climb through this window to find what their new reality is. How do I want to contribute to my company? How do I want to show up? If you let someone, right, figure that out, they come back 10,000 times more inspired to contribute, 10,000 times more able to have innovative ideas, to be able to think of new things and new frontiers and just to contribute in a way where you're like, wow, that is a person that is feeling really lit up by their job. And so, when you're thinking about the benefits, it's not just the benefit to the person, it's the benefit to your company. It's a very short-sighted goal, right? To just run as fast as you can. That's a sprint, and a sprint has a burnout. But if your people are there to run the marathon and you want to win the marathon, right? You've got to think about, how do we make this pace sustainable so that we're encouraging and fostering this environment where they get to bring their best self to work. And sometimes they're human beings, not human doings, right? So sometimes that means they need to take a break, a pause, if you will.
Right, for sure. And I think of even how companies have vacation time too, right? And employees aren't taking it because there's like this underlying current of, well, you have vacation time, but there's all these things we need to get done. And don't you dare take vacation time, because then that means the work's not going to get done, or, so it's like these really bipolar, things. And it's like, well, why even give them vacation time then?
Yeah, it takes courage, right? It's like, it takes courage. And like I said, a longer term vision. One of my clients, she was the first person in her company to take a sabbatical, and it was definitely, it's a small company, right? It was a nonprofit. And so it was a really big deal for them to give her a break, but she was at that point where she needed to refresh. It was like, she didn't want to leave. They didn't want her to leave, but it was like the old way wasn't working anymore. And she'd worked really hard and was feeling kind of burned out. And so they gave her this period off, and she ended up going back, right? She took her sabbatical. I think it was about 4 months in total, and she came back. But one of the coolest things that happened while she was gone is that the company learned how to delegate parts of her job so that when she came back, right, she got to focus on more of the stuff she wanted to do. And some of the things that she just didn't love had been given away. And some people found ways to do them more efficiently because they had a new set of eyes, right? So it's like they're re-examining the things that she did. And like, do we really need to do this? Because somebody's going to have to pick this up. And is this the best way to do it? So she actually came back into a better situation and was able to contribute at a higher level because of the delegation that occurred while she was gone. Again, longer term vision, right?
Oh, I was making my heart so happy to hear.
I know you know this.
Oh my gosh. And I have this, like, I don't know. Do you ever, I have this long-standing joke when I tell people when I'm president of the United States, which I'm not going to be anyhow, but I'm just saying, if I was president of the United States, the first thing I want to do is have everybody wear a name tag, because I hate it when I see somebody, I'm like, ugh, what's their name again? I don't want to say, I can't remember your name, but I'm like, if everybody's got a name tag, then we would just get rid of it, that uncomfort. But I've had this thought of, like, if I could be in charge of like all the businesses, I would love for people to just be like, okay, it's a free for all. Just like, what job do you want to do? Wouldn't that be
so cool? That would be so cool.
Throw it all up in the air and be like, it's like one of those machines with the cash swirling around you. So I'm like, I want some of this and some of that, you know what I mean? And it's like, wouldn't it be a hoot? Like, it's fascinating to see like what people would want to do.
Yes, I love that.
So anyhow, maybe we'll work on creating that in my grand plan to take over the world.
I support you. I support you in this.
Awesome. So good. So, and you've got your book coming up, The Taking a Career Break for Dummies. So tell us about this.
Oh my goodness. I know. So it's my first book, and I'm working with Wiley, which is like a very big publisher. They do the For Dummies series. And I think it just speaks to the relevancy that this topic is gaining, right? Because this book will straddle both worlds of career breaks and sabbaticals. It will like have more content geared towards career breaks because there's a lot of uncertainty, right? And like, how do you re-enter from that? And how do you finance that if you're foregoing an entire income? But a lot of the principles apply for both sabbaticals and career breaks. But it's basically going to be the manual on how to take a break from, asking, like we said, those deeper questions about understanding, what would I need from this experience? What do I need from my life, period, right now that I'm not getting? Is a break the right answer? Is it something else? And if it is a break, what do I do with that? So like the very first part, there's 6 parts to the book, is about assessing if a break is right for you and understanding like what kind of break. And so it's just a chance for people to really give this some thought and to really consider what they might stand to gain from this experience. And I'm just so excited to be playing a bigger part of this conversation, because I think that we're starting to demand a new way of work. And those of us that can adapt and adopt, sort of this idea more quickly, those companies are going to thrive, I believe, because they're going to be the places that people want to work, and that people can bring their best self, their most, inspired and well-rested selves to work. And so this book is going to teach people how to do it. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. Snaps for Katrina. Oh, I love it. Legally Blonde reference there, if you weren't familiar. And
I got it.
We're gonna get all the movies into this episode here.
I love it.
And so, but that is so great, because I think what's wonderful about that too, Katrina, is that you're putting a body of work out there in the world. Because I think there are some people who are like, I don't even know what this means. Like, a career break, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People who are like, I can't take a break. I got a house payment and a car payment and a kid going to college and somebody's getting married. And, or even if they don't have those things, just like, I want to buy groceries, and it's like all these funky stigmas around and just can't take a break.
Yes. Whole chapter in the book about facing the perceived drawbacks and then really thinking about what you stand to risk if you don't take one. But Jen, I love that you said this, because it's so true. And I have clients that have kids. I have clients that are the primary breadwinner. I have clients that are in their 50s and they're like, am I allowed to take a break? Will anybody hire me when I come back? Right? Yeah. I have people that have debt. Like, it's just, there's so many ways we can think, oh, that's not for me, but this is your one life. And people are working a lot longer than they did 50 years ago. So if you want to have some fun and just take a moment to just nurture yourself in another way outside of your work, it's like a break is what you've got to do. So I'm excited that this can be more accessible to people that maybe aren't ready to go all in with a coach, but are like, I'm willing to consider this crazy topic that this woman is talking about. So
that's great. And Katrina will help you through your crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I'll help you navigate that.
Yes. She's so good with that. And a lot of times I love to talk to my guests about compassion, because I'm really sensitive around compassion showing up in the workplace and the lack thereof in the workplace, etc. And so let's talk about how this whole idea of a sabbatical or career break, how that can help people with compassion. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, I've got two for you, Jen. Are you ready?
I'm
totally ready for
ready.
my two? Okay, Here we go. Number one is self-focused. Taking a break, right? Or supporting other people taking a break is about having compassion for yourself, right? Not holding yourself to some arbitrary metrics as to whether you're good enough or not good enough, successful, not successful, whether you deserve to rest or not. You deserve to rest because that's part of how humans operate. And so I believe, right, a break is a vehicle through which we can access and practice more compassion for ourselves, healing, nurturing, nourishing, right? And then when we think about others, one of the things that Hollis talked about, which I thought was just so phenomenal as a leader, right? Now the CEO, he returned from his break with so much more compassion for people that might need a break themselves for various reasons. And he was like, I get it. He was like, I have become an advocate for breaks, and I feel like I can now have more compassion when people come to me. And I'm also able to hold space and try to create and foster an environment and a company and a culture that allows other people this amazing opportunity that I've had. So I think it grows your ability to practice compassion for others and to hold space for the messiness that is life, right? And just allow them to take time to deal with all of that.
Oh, I love that. Love it. I hope all of his employees are just loving him.
I hope so too. It's hard not to. He's a really cool dude. Yeah.
Good. That's wonderful. I love it. Okay. Oh, what else is something about sabbaticals or taking a break that is on your heart that you really, really want people to know?
At the end of the day, the most important thing I can share is that you're worth it. You are absolutely worth taking time off. The fear of being bored or not knowing what to do to fill your time is just ridiculous. It is basically an extended period of time to reconnect and get to know yourself for who you are today, and to decide who you want to be and what you want to get out of what is left of this life. And I wish everyone could have one. I want anyone that is even remotely able to take one and thinks that they want one to consider one, because this is what life is. You're living right now, and tomorrow is not promised. As cliche as that is, it's not promised. And so are you making a plan to get the most out of it for yourself that you can get out of it, instead of forward thinking, future thinking, and thinking that it's all just going to magically come together for you at the end? Like, how are you showing up for today? How are you planning for tomorrow? Are you prioritizing yourself?
I love it. They're totally worth it. Oh, so good. All right. What's the one good place people can find you?
The one good place people can find me is they can go to KMcGhee, KMCGHEE coaching.com/45 things. And when you think to yourself, what the heck would I do on a break? What do people even do on a break? You will find a list of 45 of the coolest things, the most epic things people have done on a break. And some of them are very simple. Somebody fostered a child, like they took on a kid, right? It gave them the space to do that. Chad has one on that list. Yeah, Chad's on that list. So you can go find that out. But it's such a fun list of like all kinds of things, from like travel related to like people that stayed at home, people that invested in themselves. This is really cool. So you can find that list, and then you'll be on my mailing list, and you'll find out when I launch my book.
Yay. I'm so excited. Oh, so good. Katrina McGhee, thank you so much for coming on to today's Top Leaders.
Thank you for having me, Jen.